I know that I asked you to write a tuba concerto, but like you had written a violin concerto and then to go from violin to tuba, like what made you say yes to writing a tuba concerto?
Well, first I knew your playing and how fantastic you play. And for me, everything is personal. What I do, you know, if I don't feel doing it, I'm not gonna do it. So, and I felt just the respect I had for you, what I knew of your playing, how beautiful it is, and all the registers. I'm a brass player,
Yeah.
and I faked on tuba in some parades. One of my closest friends at Juilliard was David Kirk, as a tuba player.
Oh,
So
nice.
we always was tuba. And you know the ironic thing that when I was on tour in Europe, in a lot of the houses, the tubist of the orchestras came
Oh,
and
cool.
said, "We know you're writing a piece for Carol, and you know we're looking forward to seeing how hard it is." And I didn't know you at the time, but then when I started to talk to you and work with you, what I told orchestra today, just how straightforward you are, how professional you are about things, how direct you communicate. You communicate with words the same way you do with your horn. So when we started to work on it, kind of thought you had in the outlines we discussed, everything for me down to this point has been a highlight. It's very easy and very straightforward.
That's great. I mean, were you excited about writing for the tuba or like was it a fun challenge to
Yeah, I wanna get down in the bass clef,
Yeah.
you know, and learn how to just write. I'm always afraid of over orchestrating things, and I also wanted to write for the tuba as a bass instrument.
Mm.
So and just do funny things like the first one is up, so I start down low, but it goes up high,
Yeah.
and uh, go back and forth. But I also learned a lot about it from just the first critiques you had of the music I sent you. I look forward to what your observations would be, and it was very instructional.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe we could talk about each of the
Sure,
movements. Like,
sure, yeah.
so, I mean, up we
Let's
already
talk about it.
mentioned, but
Yeah, I wanted to in the beginning I wanted something that had a fourth bass because tuba's always playing fifths and fourths because they're down in the bottom.
Yep.
And I didn't want the tuba to play imitation of a trumpet or of another instrument, but just be powerful. And just the themes that come out of that movement, I wanted to be like a kind of quasi rondo form that just came back and you came back to the things and we would arrange them in different ways.
yeah. And I feel like in that movement, you also give hints of the kind of like funky stuff to
Right, right,
come.
right.
Yeah, because it all ties together so well. Do you, like, did you conceive of everything at once, like
I
fitting
did,
together like
you
that?
know, I did, but as I told him, it was with another. As I told orchestra, it was with another fourth
That's
movement.
right. Yeah.
But I was struggling with that fourth movement. So one thing that happened was when you called me and said, "Well, I don't like this movement,"
I didn't
right?
say that.
Well, you would be nice about it because you're nice. But I understood, and I was actually having so many problems with it, figuring out how to make it work. It was more like the first movement,
Yeah,
you know, but in a faster language. I actually sketched out the entire movement, your part.
right.
But when you said you wanted it to be bebop, I actually was happy to do to to you know what I
To
mean?
change that. I'm really glad to hear you say that because like I mean, yeah, what you had written was also cool, but I was just like, but I really want to play some
Right, right,
bebop, and
right.
like I was glad you were open to it, and I suspected that like since you hadn't sketched out the
The whole
accompaniment for
all the
that
parts,
movement,
right?
that I was like, I think he might be open. So
Yeah, no, it was good. But all of the things like in the first movement, some of the cuts we made and the things you suggested, all were very good things, and that's what I look forward to more the collaborative
yeah,
kind of. And when you told me a couple of times, hey, I could go in a really low register here, or this could be,
oh yeah,
well, if I'm a singer part and do a multiphonic, you know, the bass parts, the two parts can go here, and then I could sing up here, or
yeah,
change this to do, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Every change was really good, and also how you understood what the form is.
yeah,
A lot of times you work in a form and you talk with somebody, they don't really know what the form is, so they'll want to cut things because of their part,
ah,
and you were not really like that. Yeah, and you were taking into account the harmony and where things. So even a couple of times, well, you could go from here to here, and it would be good inflection points in the
yeah,
music.
yeah. What about the second movement? Like, what was your inspiration for that one?
Just funky too, but we were talking, and
Yeah,
you said you want to do some things that's fun,
yeah,
and you said you don't want to just be just do something just straight. That you want something that you could have a good time, and everybody could have a good time. So I figure I put that's what maybe put hand claps in the first movement
Yeah.
because I know I'm gonna come back to the hand claps. So
Yeah.
I wrote a boogaloo
Hmm.
because that's a good style. It has the top and the bottom, and it's also playful.
Yeah.
And it will give me a chance to write you in the bass clef and have you play bass parts in addition to playing uh, treble parts and melodic parts.
Yeah, so I had asked you to include funk somehow, and so and then you just sort of went off to your cave or wherever you compose,
Right.
and then came back with stuff. So I didn't really know what to expect in terms of
Uh-huh.
funk, and then I got this movement, and I was so stoked. Do you know that album, The Nuyorican Funk Experience?
No,
It's just like a compilation of a
it
bunch of
sounds like
stuff.
something
but-
I should know. I like the
it's
sound.
I
of
mean
it.
it's so great. So I was visiting my brother in New York City when I was like 18, and I felt like so cool for just being in Manhattan as a kid with my brother. And we went to a CD store where you had like little listening booths, and I found this recording of all this super funky stuff with the Latin vibe, and I was just like, this is my jam. And so like you wrote me this movement, and it is such a dream. So
Oh,
like
thank you so
it's
much.
got like a sense of humor. It's got all the percussion vibes that take us to different like ratios of like
Right.
Latin to funk, and
Right,
it's just
right.
such a fun journey, and getting to play just this quirky bass line throughout.
Well, I appreciate you know that you like it. I tried to put the fourths in it like we did in the
Yeah.
first movement. I tried to have a kind of different take on Americana. I have Americana section, then I give us the boogaloo, then we do the danzone, we go to the 2/3 clave, mambo. And because I have so many friends in the style, and I've spent so many years with them, I always call them, say, hey man, make sure that I'm not writing something that's corny.
We don't
Is
want
this
corny.
in clave, or how is this if I was writing a boogaloo? Would the bass go down like this, or what should if the tambourine part, is it like this or that? And yeah, I wanted to, and still it's coming around. You know, today was better than it's been. I'm still wondering if I could make it be. But yeah, I mean, I gave you some good wide intervals and things that are
Yeah.
bass-like and difficult. You play all of it so well. It's so easy, the way it comes out, and also so lyrical that I was thinking maybe I should have made it harder.
I mean, you're welcome to look at it again.
Yeah,
if
you told
want.
me make some of this stuff harder. You don't make this.
Well, no. I had asked you to make more stuff harder before I had seen the fourth movement. Let's be
Right.
clear. Then I was like, it's hard enough.
Right, right. But yeah, I just tried to give you different personalities, you know, because
Yeah.
each personality is difficult to play. It has its own virtuosity.
Yeah.
So with the second movement, I want to just be playful and down low. I love the lower octave. You told me to write it in the one part. I'm still trying to clarify that. But
Yeah. Well, I loved what you said at one point about virtuosity is about so much more than just playing fast notes.
Right,
And I really think this piece gives you a chance to do that in terms of showing your stylistic prowess, and just it's such a range. It's great.
well, I really appreciate that. I want to know if you get a chance, listen to that Big Sky part,
Yeah.
and tell me if I should put more just notes for you where you're touching the bass. I don't know, because you need.
Okay.
I was thinking about your chops, you know, because I know the third is a blow.
Oh, you mean like write more like?
Boom, boom, boom.
So you like the-
boom, 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 boom. I like when you way down low.
When
with
I
the
double the
funky
bass
tuba.
line? Yeah.
Yeah,
I
just
mean,
not the whole
pretty
line, but just
satisfying.
touch on it.
Yeah.
If you look at the beginning of it, just tell me if you think, hey, you can put me in here or there.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk about the third movement then.
Right.
So like that's sort of our, classic slow
Right.
movement of a concerto, but it definitely has another series of moods.
Right. I wanted to go because the tuba always is interesting personality to me. It's such a singing instrument, and when you play it, you really can sing on your instrument. You know, so you could have a deeply lyrical way of playing, and I felt like it would be interesting. Something I had never done is try to write the solo part to get slower, and the accompanying parts to get faster,
Mm-hmm.
and to have instructions in the parts that the emotion would be specific to a feeling, like what you do when you're playing.
Yeah.
Like you can play slow notes, and you can have a note with a bittersweet quality. You can have a note that's joyful. You can have a note that's like a deep moan.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a cry, and all these things are different, and they have different meanings. So I was thinking to write you a part that started introspectively, with the kind of thing that we equate with Bill Evans and Wayne Shorter, those kind of musicians in
Yeah.
jazz. And I think some French music and classical music has that. Also, some of Schoenberg's music, if you take away the emphasis on the harmonic aspect of it and you concentrate on the emotional states of the music, he can get into very deeply introspective positions. So I wanted the beginning to be introspective and then to go to something that had more of a kind of romantic lyricism, like what you would find in the 19th century pieces we all grew up playing. And
it's kind of a recitative part.
right,
Yeah.
right, like in an opera or something where they just answer you in this kind of traditional harmony with a couple of little twists in it. And then from that through the fourths on the offbeats that I have you play, then come to go back to the introspective part and then go to a march that's like a chaconne type of bass line that's the same, but that has a reference to the minstrel show, because I always think about the bones and the tambourines. I put the castanets in there and I use the tambourine and the kind of the bittersweet quality of having to make a parody of yourself. And I think with the tuba, always they make a tuba play high like a piccolo. It's always an instrument that they try to make be a funny instrument, you know.
Yeah.
So I wanted the tuba to deal with the whole pathos that comes with this type of parody. So
Yeah.
the middle sections of that are burlesque, where it's like extreme instruments and dissonances. And then when you sing your part, you slowly realize that no matter what you do, because you're like a comic character, but it's tragic too.
Yeah.
And I was thinking
Sad
about
clown.
the contemporary rappers and the old school minstrels, tattooed up a certain way and always being forced to just deal with foolishness. And what you did, what is your pathology, what things did you do that were negative, how can you degrade yourself, and the nation gets enjoyment from that. And at some point you realize it, but when you're younger, you're trying to make it, you get paid for it, all whatever comes with you become a star for it, you're known. The same thing was also true in the 19th century.
Yeah.
We just don't know it. That people were really well known. It was very popular form. And I think you play so specifically on all of those things and do such a great job. That's actually, to me, the most difficult thing to play, is to have all those long sustained notes on a huge instrument.
Yeah.
So if you could just give me your sense of just, playing, because you liked playing that. I mean, because I was wondering whether you would be like, I don't want to know about this.
Yeah, I mean, well, like when I first saw it, when it was just the tuba part, I was worried about my chops failing at the end of the movement, and I was like, maybe we can have a little rest. But then when I heard even just the sketches of the accompaniment, I just heard the build of intensity with everything below it, with all the rhythmic interactions, like the 12/8 versus the 4/4 and everything. It was just too effective for me to drop out, because like you're really specific in this movement about the emotional characteristics that you want the soloist and the whole orchestra to play. But it's great for me because this is actually a practice that I have my students use, which is like take what emotion that you want to convey out of the music and narrow that down to a specific word or key phrase, so that you know like what kind of emotion that you're trying to get out of it, and then you'll be able to perform it better. You'll be able to be more convinced about what you're putting forward. And the fact that you just wrote that for me makes it really clear, like, oh, this is the moment where I like, what is it, like wail, shout as if wailing wasn't enough. Or
Right. All that kind of crazy stuff.
it makes it like, yeah, this is like the depth and intensity that this part needs.
So what do you do when you're practicing something like that? Like I can tell by how you learn how meticulous you are in your preparation.
Yeah.
And also how much you knew the piece, like what specifics were. But how do you approach things incrementally, or do you all at once, or what's your general practice approach?
Yeah, I start with sections, but I definitely have to like sort of analyze the bigger picture. For me, knowing the full structure of the piece helps me understand where I am in certain sections, and
Right.
if I want this section to be more whatever than this one, then I'm not giving it away over here. So like it's super important to know for your pacing and everything, especially as a low brass player and like needing to use so much air and stuff like that. Like I need to know how am I gonna make my breath so that like I'm not interrupting the musical idea when I do breathe, and then I have enough juice to make what I want to happen.
Right. That's a big deal for people who are on brass instruments. They
Yeah.
won't know, but like we're only powered by air. And I think all the time, because I know I played tuba a little bit in parades, and it's that tuba takes it's another mindset because you have to think in the large space.
Yeah.
So when you approach playing like all those kind of really long notes, and you look at something and you have a specific emotion that you're working on, do you have to be very specific where you write your breaths, or do you have to be very choreographed, like almost like an Olympic gymnast, or do you just kind of you let it just come to you, or you very particular? Because over such a long time, it's
Yeah, it depends on the phrase. And at the end of the third movement, it's pretty clear where I can and can't breathe. Like, I'm just not gonna interrupt the long note to take a breath. But yeah, I just know to pace myself so that I will make it to the end of the note. So like knowing how long each note lasts. But sometimes, yeah, I have to make a musical decision saying like, well, I just can't last this long.
Right.
Where would be the least intrusive place? So sometimes it does have to be really thought out because I want to do something with the music, but just given my own physical limitations, I have to find something around.
So I want to also ask you a question about when you're playing, and this can seem also crazy to somebody who doesn't play a brass instrument. Is when you stop playing and you go to take a breath. Now you stop. No matter if you're playing along with you, there's no music. How do you maintain your intensity in your relationship with the ensemble? Like you can actually lose a momentum when you breathe. So I'm always wondering, well, on a big instrument like that, what do you think when you breathe? Are you just thinking of breath? Are you continuing the music? Because a breath is much more. It's an apostrophe. It's a pause. You know what I mean? So how, are you doing something before you breathe to keep the momentum of the music? Almost like when you talk, sometimes you might say, well, I was thinking about, so I'm keeping you with me by, how do you approach breathing when it's in a long passage like that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because ideally you wouldn't breathe at all, right? If you were just like a cello player, you could just change the direction of your bow and be fine. But you just have to breathe at some point. So for me, I don't think too much about the breath specifically. I'm more thinking about what do I want the phrase to sound like overall. And sometimes, I'll measure out like this breath will be about an eighth note, right? And that helps you if you're inhaling for a specific amount of time, then you don't lose the time.
You stay in time,
Yeah.
And do you, so let's say you say, okay, I'm gonna take this breath for an eighth note. Do you do something to the note before you take the breath to kind of let people know I'm gonna keep going, or do you not consider, just say, well, I gotta take this breath, and when you come back in, do you feel like you're restarting? You already told me you're thinking of a big phrase, so I know you're not really restarting, but from a technical standpoint, sometimes you don't want to unattack a note because you got to come back in. You have another attack. You have another.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the magic, the illusion of making the breath sound like it's not there means that you're just not drawing attention to it.
Right.
So sometimes people think like, oh, I need to blow into the note before the breath so that it, I don't know, rings in the hall or whatever. But to me, that's just like, what? just like you're drawing attention to that breath. And the same thing if you like cut off the note. So like early, right? If you just kind of clip it and make it a bad sound. So really it's just, you want to make a note that sounds good and makes sense in the phrase that continues afterward.
Well, another thing I want to ask you is, what is it about this kind of fraternal order of tubists? I was just telling you that we went to halls all over Europe, and I mean, in 4 or 5 of the halls, the tubists of the orchestra came, and all said, "Yeah, we know you're writing a piece for Carol." And I mean, they all were very up on you and what you did, and they were like, "Man, what is the piece like, or when is Carol playing it, or what's going on with it?" I said, "Y'all are really civilized. Y'all not like trumpet players." So
No, it's cool. I think maybe we all get lonely because we're the only one in our orchestra. And so when we see another tuba player, we're just like drooling to talk to them.
Right. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a nice community. Like, it's funny because you go to a tuba conference and people are just hanging out and drinking, whatever. And I just can't imagine going to like a flute conference and like the same thing.
Trumpet conference.
The
No,
same vibe.
what mouthpiece do you have? Well,
No offense to my flute player friends, but we didn't talk about the fourth movement yet,
Yeah.
so we should talk about bebop.
yeah. Well, when you said you suggested bebop to me, I was great. You know, it was gonna be a lot of work. It's a lot of notes. I knew it would be fast.
Yeah.
But I wanted to write something that has never been, try to write for an orchestra and write bebop and try to actually use the language of it and have them play breaks and riffs and all the things that are part of it, and write in the register that you could play and give you the actual way of playing. I mean, your phrasing and the way you've learned how to play between the triplet and the eighth note is fantastic, by the way. I mean,
Thanks.
there was a lot of, it's very difficult to do without it sounding corny.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I commend you.
I'm not corny.
Oh, you
Yes.
know, but how did you approach practicing? Did you just get your metronome, start slow,
Oh,
and get
yeah.
faster, or did you?
I had to start slow. And it was kind of fun because playing it at like a third tempo, it just still sounded really good, right? It just sounded like a jazz standard that I had already heard before. And then as I sped it up, it sounded, more and more
Right.
like bebop. But it was fun to also take the swing along with, like, as I'm using my metronome work from slow to fast. So, like, you kind of swung more as you're going slower, and then,
right.
it kind of fades a little bit. But honestly, it was really easy to memorize that movement because I shed it so much.
Right.
Like, it just, like,
You're
every
looking at
lick
it,
takes
right.
shedding. But it all just comes together and just makes sense. I can't really explain it other than it felt like I knew it once I heard it.
Right. Oh well, I'm glad for that. Yeah, I tried to use different forms and different things in the music and put a little twist in it. 3, 4, 6, 8, and use also the vocabulary, fourths and stuff that we had done before in the first movement, and use the breaks. Bum, 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 and then going up. The same kind of. The same type of language. For me, I'm always thinking just as a player.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking of I don't want to give you something that's so hard that you don't want to play it, even though you can play it. you know what I mean? The feeling of
I know those pieces.
okay, I have to play this, and I don't want you looking at me like. But okay, I gotta respect that this guy is older than me. He's been out here. Thank you. I want to give you something that you want to play, and I also know the thing that's not really discussed as much is just the kind of thing of having to play something for the first time, be in front of people, be with your colleagues that you play with all the time. Of course, they already respect you and they love you, but they're still trying to see what is this like, and what are you going to do? You're like an ambassador for a piece, but also for your instrument. So I want to know, how do you approach just all of the kind of lead up to playing the premiere? Now you're going into the hall, you're rehearsing with the orchestra, and what does it mean to you to premiere a piece and to have all of the fun and the pressure that comes along with doing that?
Yeah, I think ambassador is a great word for it because I've had so many conversations with you around this piece and like been around for its like growth, right? Adolescence and
It was still in
maturity.
adolescence.
Yeah.
It needs to mature. It's going to mature after that first night.
But it's been great doing these workshops that I've had a couple opportunities to do premiere performances. So it's been great to learn how it goes when it comes together, where the troublesome parts are, and what kinds of things to help the orchestra along. So I have all those in my pocket going into the Philadelphia premiere. But I also know that like my colleagues are some of the greatest players in the world, and so I know it's going to come together really quickly with them, and I really hope they enjoy playing in all these different styles as much as I do, because it's such a blast when it all comes together.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I love them, so
Yeah.
I'd love to have an opportunity to write and know they would play it and that you would play it. So I want to thank you for all of what you put into it. I mean, I don't know if I even conveyed it, just how serious you are about things, and how clear-minded, and all the suggestions you had and the critiques and the celebratory, everything was real. So
Yeah.
and I've been very grateful. I've learned a lot speaking with you, writing for you, hearing your ideas and thoughts and things that you thought about. It's been a thoroughly enjoyable experience for me. So thank you.
Thank you. I super appreciate that. And obviously, like, there's no brass player who hasn't like drooled over all of your albums and like it's just you're just such a legend to us, and to have you write a piece for me just like feels like I can retire happy now, right?
You're too kind.
I know that you don't have to write music. This is kind of something you do. You do so many things, and yet you just choose to do this.
Well, I love doing it
on the side, I guess. But it's turned out to be such a boon for the tuba world. Like we're so hungry for great music that's actually written for our instrument that. I promise that the tuba world will be great ambassadors for your music. We're all so excited to play it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I love that tuba. So
yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much.